Yesterday, we jokingly said about Bahrain taking influence from Las Vegas, but it seems that just paying tribute to the newly christened race in Sin City wasn't enough, as Turn 11 once again fell apart like my parents' relationship. Is this a case of the foundations coming apart, or is this just unfortunate wearing that has only become clear during a testing period? Back to the F1, theories and excuses as to the cause of the track's brittle nature have been thrown out left, right and center, with the coverage clearly not wanting to give the same scorn as they did Las Vegas, either due to the track being a long-time member of the calendar, or potentially an understanding that Bahrain was the highest bidder to hold the opening race, making it highly unlikely the sport would move it to a more appropriate track for testing. Either way, the Bahrain International Circuit has certainly done itself and the FIA no favours in the testing period for the upcoming F1 season, bringing up some pretty valid questions and criticisms of the testing location and the governing body in charge of mandating safety procedures that deemed this track appropriate for a testing period it failed to perform in. Want to know the reaction to the Bahrain track blunders? From outrage to confusion, there's a lot of questions being asked of all parties involved. And stick around because there's been increased speculation about Bahrain's future in regards to its uses for testing. So for 2 days in a row, Turn 11 of the Bahrain International Circuit appeared to have all the structural integrity of a croissant, with the drainage systems falling apart twice in as many days. If it was just a one-off then, despite the frustration, the incident could have been put down to just that, an incident. But for it to be a repeat offender in the same week? Well, that just seems shady. The first incident came as the Mercedes driven by Lewis Hamilton drove directly over the top of the drainage system while staying within track limits on a line we expect to see come race day next week, causing an onlooking Carlos Sainz to attempt to signal for a flag, only to see his teammate Charles Leclerc drive directly over the debris, obliterating a section of the floor of the Ferrari car he would later be stepping into. Ferrari immediately set up the screens and knew just as quickly that the car would need some pretty extensive repairs, removing the floor and replacing it with a spare that they very fortunately had with them. Ferrari and drain covers seemed to go together like Leclerc and not converting pole positions to wins, with it seeming that the cause for this particular incident being the ground effect sucking the drainage up, similarly to how the incident in Las Vegas occurred at the back end of last season. Track officials came to the scene quickly to kick around and shuffle their feet over the drainage to check the structural integrity of Turn 11. However, the remainder of the morning session was postponed to the afternoon. However, the teams ultimately still lost out on a large period of that morning testing period, and drivers in for a half day lost out to an even greater extent compared to those staying in the cars for the afternoon. Water under the bridge and all that, the rest of the day was steady and threw up no more incidents. However, the peace would not last as Sergio Perez loosed yet another part of the Turn 11 apex drainage by seemingly different means. It would appear that unlike the initial incident the day before, the cause for the second day's drainage uprooting was due to lateral load placed on the drainage by the car itself, turning into the upcoming corner, rather than the ground effect phenomenon that caused both the Thursday and Las Vegas incidents. Adrian Newey's reaction, however, points to the causes of the drain cover incident being far closer than upon initial inspection, with the legendary car designer saying, "The cars are too big and too heavy, that's why this keeps happening." Obviously, when Newey speaks, the F1 world listens, and in this case, it would certainly make sense that a structurally sound part of the track being torn up by the ground effect alone being somewhat unlikely. Realistically, the structural integrity of the drainage will have likely been compromised by drivers stretching the racing line as close to track limits as possible, causing elements of the drainage to become dislodged or weakened, likely due to there being no reinforcement under the drains that exists elsewhere on the track. The water needs somewhere to go after all. So it seems the pushing force of the load set by the weight of the car, as well as the pulling forces of the ground effect creating suction due to the low pressure under the car, is enough to dislodge drainage from concrete like teeth from a gum, wiggling them out of place and pulling them free with enough of a final pull. So after spending some time on his stomach checking out the underside of the car and gracing us with a new potential meme format, Newey has struck the nail on the head as per usual. The potential cause of the track's weakened structure caused much discussion, with fingers being pointed at the unexpected deluge experienced during the F2 and F3 testing a few weeks prior, providing an unprecedented amount of rain, and another potential explanation being wear and tear that should have been more closely monitored by the governing body in the lead up to testing, seeing as this circuit is often used not only for Formula 1, but other racing categories too. So what is to be done about this? Well, it would seem that the FIA are taking action in order to prevent future track-related red flags, at least for the first racing weekend, by filling the drains that the metal grids are covering with concrete. The long-term weather forecast is indicating no expected rain for the first race weekend that follows testing, leading to the FIA to deem this a satisfactory measure. There are also other measures being considered, with the FIA examining footage of previous races and testing periods to see if track limit enforcements on Turn 11 are necessary due to drivers overly pushing the limits of the track. However, neither incident occurred with all four wheels outside of the white line, making this, in our opinion, a null point. What could be more appropriate and related to that, as well as having a case history of being the direction the FIA may take, is to repaint the white line in which the drivers must remain, moving it away from potential problem areas, as more of those may be assessed following scrutineering of the circuit after testing, while a more long-term fix can be implemented in anticipation for next year. If you cast your mind back to 2023, a similar solution was implemented at the Qatar Grand Prix after it was deemed that the curbs were too aggressive and caused concerns amongst the teams, drivers and governing body due to causing excessive aggravation on the tyres and prompting concerns of potential tyre failures. Let's just hope they figure out a more long-term fix by the time we get to the European leg, as I doubt filling the Spa drains with concrete is much of an option. Ted Kravitz would suggest that all other circuits as well as the governing body learn from this series of incidents in order to avoid such disruptions to racing weekends in the future, as well as negate unnecessary risks to cars, drivers and spectators in the future as well. This is a warning to every other circuit and the F1 calendar, as well as the FIA, the body that actually runs races, that with this year's cars the engineers have made them more effective in sucking the car to the ground that creates an opposite sucking motion that can pull any tarmac or circuit furniture up from its fittings. And every circuit on the F1 calendar will now be off their own back or should be told by the FIA to go and check their drain covers or manhole covers or whatever it is and give them higher loading tests than they had before to make sure they don't get sucked up by the F1 cars. Serious questions have now been asked the Bahrain circuit, which had previously been criticized for not being reflective of other tracks on the calendar, especially early on in the season where Melbourne and Jeddah hold little in common with the Bahrain International Circuit other than the fact that the cars go fast on top of them. What's more is that the circuit has an especially abrasive surface, making it brutal on tires, meaning drivers have to drive on eggshells as it were, in order to avoid obliterating the tires when attempting long runs. Obviously, Bahrain is a track on which drivers will have to drive during the season, however it doesn't have the benefits of being a catch-all testing ground like Barcelona was. With F1 starting the season in Australia next year, as well as the increased scrutiny on the Bahrain circuit, could we see a different testing location next year? While it has been assumed that the testing location being Bahrain is merely a formality, the location of next year's testing is yet to be announced by the FIA. Following the uproar of Madrid's application being accepted, could we see a return to the Barcelona circuit as a middle ground for the two tracks? Sadly for us, a return to Estoril is not likely on the cards. Perhaps the Mugello circuit could provide an appropriate location, given that Italy is the first country on the European calendar. Let us know where you'd want to see testing in the comments below, whether as a serious suggestion or just a dream location. For us, a return to Estoril or an all-weather Suzuka test would make for incredible spectacles, however they would certainly cause issues of their own, so we don't expect they'd ever happen before you get to angrily typing in the comments, nerd.